we honour the freedom for which people actually died in the theatres of war, and unless we honour that by allowing people to exchange views, we collectively will be poorer. And I think that was the point you were making, and I was going to end with all of that. Let's go on with the questions, because it's most beneficial.
Can I make one very quick point? Sir, I very strongly agree with you. You come, of course, from the Czech Republic. I'm right about that? Yes. And so you have seen, because I think you're nearly 80, you have seen the Hitler, and you have also seen communism. Now you have seen one of the most splendid things that's ever happened in your nation, Václav Klaus. Now he has written, come on, a round of applause for Václav Klaus. Now he has written an excellent book, which is exactly to your point, called Blue Planet in Green Shackles. And he recently made a speech in New York to 1,000 scientists. I was privileged to be there. And it was a speech, profound economics, profound knowledge of the consequences of going down the road we're going down with the climate. And he was given a standing ovation when he concluded with the words which I think sum up what you are saying and what I agree with too. It is not about climatology, it's about freedom.
Well done. All right, we'll just take the lady here. Thank you. Yes.
I'm pleased to see that it's mankind being blamed for the issues and not womankind.
You're blameless entirely.
The question I'd like to put to both of our speakers is, assist me with this. I have a daughter living in New York who has experienced one of the worst and coldest winters and has been locked in her apartment. I have two daughters in London who likewise have experienced a white Christmas and have also been unable to get to work on many days because it is so cold. So how come, where is the global warming? Thank you.
Tim?
Global warming doesn't mean that we don't get winter anymore. We're still going to have seasons and you're still going to have some cold weather. There's a really important difference between weather, which is what's changing day to day, and climate, the long-term average. So global warming means you're going to get less of the really cold weather. But in terms of what's just happened in the US, which is a really big snowstorm, that's not something about cold, that's about precipitation. They had record precipitation. Can I speak?
Yes.
I can't speak.
Just. Yeah, I think what the lady is saying, that the terminology of the debate has changed from global warming to climate change, I think is your point. Yeah, but just let Tim finish the answer.
Now, I've forgotten what I was saying. Oh,
well,
I did my PhD in University of Manitoba, so I lived in Winnipeg for years, and they get really cold winters. And the thing you learnt there is if in winter it snowed, it was warm weather. Because when it's really cold, you don't get snow. It's so cold, there's no evaporation, you don't have any snow falling down. So a big snowstorm is because you've had lots of precipitation. It's not because the world's not warming.
Well, let's hear Lord Monckton on that.
Yeah. Once again, very briefly, it is quite right to say that merely because we have had 3 miserable Northern Hemisphere winters in a row, this does not constitute a trend. It is merely a fluctuation of exactly the kind that can happen in either direction in the climate. You've had a couple of very hot summers down here. This doesn't mean it's global warming either. The fact is that these fluctuations, however much they may be temporarily useful to one side or another of this debate, are not the stuff of which real climate research is made. They are interesting in their own right, particularly, madam, as you say. They are record snowfalls in Washington, for instance. They've never had snow like it ever since records began 150 years ago. Of course, that is of interest, but it doesn't establish that the theory advocated by the other side in this debate is wrong. And we have to concede that to the other side. What I would say is this: there has been no statistically significant global warming for 15 years. That begins to be long enough to raise questions once again about the magnitude of climate sensitivity, about which I shall have some interesting things to say to you in my closing remarks. There has in fact been a global cooling trend for each of the last, for the last 9 years, I should say. But we know from one of the ClimateGate emailers, Kevin Trenberth, he was saying there's been no global warming for a decade, and we can't explain why. And it's a travesty that we can't. That's what they're saying to one another privately, while publicly they're saying that this is the warmest decade since records began 150 years ago. The two are not incompatible, actually. There was a very rapid warming associated with the El Nino of 1998, which appears to have gone right through until the end of 2001, influencing global temperatures, whereupon we've had a falling back since then. And that, again, is a natural change. We can't read too much into it, but it does raise questions about the magnitude of climate sensitivity. There, we can fairly say we need to raise an eyebrow and keep watching.
Thank you. Yes, I think the point was made. The weather you're talking about, actually, you're talking about the weather. Weather is not necessarily climate. They're separate arguments. Let's go right now to the other side of the room and start to come back. Yes, thank you. The man with the vest. Thank you.
I've got a question for both panellists. Paul Ehrlich, who wrote The Population Bomb back in the 1970s, has very interesting views on climate change as well. Because humans are causing climate change, humans are the problem, so we need less humans to stop climate change. This is what Paul Ehrlich is pushing in many of the population controls in the UN. Now my question, first of all, Lord Monckton, is are you worried about this conflation of the population control agenda with the global warming agenda? And my question to Tim is, do you agree with the population controllers that we should have less human beings? And would you then accuse me and my wife, who want to have very many children, of wanting to be selfish and making a large carbon footprint because we're Catholic and we're going to have a lot of children? Thank
you. The moderator would say go for it. But Tim, have you got all that?
Do you want a signed note from me for permission?
I think he's asking about the contradiction
seriously.
between those who talk about carbon footprints and those who argue for high populations, like our current Prime Minister. I think that's what he's asking. Is there a contradiction there? How do those two fit? Should we have fewer people, he's saying?
Well, if I get back to which was what my whole argument was about, which is about climate sensitivity, it's high. Unless we reduce our carbon emissions, we're going to cause a lot of warming, and this is going to be really bad for us. The best way, in my opinion, to do that is not to control population. I think that's a very bad idea, and I think the only way to do it, I think, is coercive and completely against human rights and human nature. We have to solve the problem, and I'm actually, as a computer science, I'm in the faculty of engineering at University of New South Wales, and it's an engineering problem. It's how can we redesign our economy to work out how to still have the same lifestyle we have and not put so much CO2 in the atmosphere and cause this enormous problem for the future.
Lord Monckton.
Right. The paradox is this. If you stop people burning fossil fuels in poorer countries so that they can have electricity cheaply to lift them out of poverty, then you will keep them in poverty and their populations will increase beyond the capacity of the land to sustain them. This is a well-known demographic fact. It is poorer populations that breed more quickly, and the only successful way to bring populations to stability is to raise the general standard of living of a population that is, as too many are in this world, abjectly poor. It is absolutely vital, therefore, that we do nothing whatsoever to restrict the right of countries such as China, India, Indonesia, Africa, much of South America, to burn as much fossil fuel as they need to burn so as to give their people electricity as the cheapest and most certain way of lifting them out of poverty and hence stabilizing the population all by themselves. And let me give you some figures on this. In the late 1990s, the United Nations predicted that world population would rise around 2000 to, let me just get the figure,